Hello and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program. This is episode 2 in our little Let's Play series here. And in our previous episode, if you watched, we actually ended up getting our little basic orbiter into orbit around planet Kerbal. And if you watched that, I kind of explained all the little maneuvers and how to build a ship and all the little maneuvers you need to do to achieve that first orbit. And in this episode, we're going to talk about once you're in orbit, what can you do? How do you do different orbital operations? And so here we see the planet, and here's our little ship. So we're actually going to just click on that. We're going to fly that mission. It's going to load in here. And there it is. There's our little craft that we built. Okay, so I guess I should probably start by discussing what is an orbit actually. You know, because some people, maybe don't know, but what it literally is yes, you're falling straight down towards the planet, but the problem is you're going so fast laterally around that you're just missing the ground every time. You just don't have a chance to hit the ground because you're going so fast around the planet. Now this is a concept that, you know, to many Earthlings, it's kind of ridiculous. It doesn't really make much sense, and you can't really blame us because we've been stuck on the actual ground. The closest we ever get to orbit is when we jump. It's a little mini orbit for about a second. We hit our apoapsis in about a second and we fall right back down again. We obviously can't propel ourselves forward fast enough to get enough velocity to get around the planet. If we could, that would be pretty crazy, right? It's like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, if anyone's ever read that. It's according to that book, the secret to flying is falling, but at the last second you forget that you're falling and you actually miss the ground. And that's kind of what this is like. It's like falling but missing the ground. Alright, so here we are in our little circular orbit. It's roughly circular. And what we're going to do is, let's say you want to raise that orbit up. You want to just go higher. So the most important thing you need to know when you're making orbital corrections for raising and lowering orbits, you always want to do them at the apoapse or the periapse. That's the most efficient way to do it. So we're just going to put a little maneuver node here, and we're gonna thrust prograde again, right? That's the vector we know about so far. Let's get it to let's be daring. Let's go to 300. Let's go to about 300. There we go. It's going to cost us 137 meters per second. And the node is pretty much upon us, so I'm just going to start thrusting right now. So we are thrusting in this direction, the direction that your ship is traveling, right? And you can see our blue orbit is bubbling out. It's getting close. And boom. I went past it a little bit, but that's okay. So now what this means is the highest point of our orbit is now 305 kilometers, right? So, oh look, we're just about right over the KSC, the Kerbal Space Center right there. Do a little flyby. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to warp time a little bit. And as I'm warping, I guess I should probably talk about the other indicators on the Navball. So we know about prograde, right? That's the direction the ship's traveling. And we know about retrograde. It's the opposite side. It looks a little greener, right? It's got a little X right through it. If we thrust in this direction, we will lose energy. We're subtracting from the orbit. It will slow right down. But let's say we want to burn another direction. This little pink upside down triangle here, that's anti-normal. I think in the last episode I called the blue one a normal, and I think I was absolutely wrong. So the pink ones are normal and anti-normal. And south, right here, we're putting straight down, is anti-normal. And then of course, north, the northern line, you can see the line on the Navball, it's an orange line. Also a pink triangle, that's just called normal. And if you thrust in either of these directions, you will change what's known as the inclination of the orbit. If you notice, our orbit right now has actually a 0-degree inclination, or we are 90 degrees over the ecliptic. The ecliptic being the line that the moon and the sun are both on. And they got that name because, well, they can eclipse each other, right? We know that. So we call that the ecliptic line. And so anyway, thrusting north or south will change the angle of our orbit to go either slightly angled up, kind of a diagonal over the planet, or slightly down. and we'll get into that a little bit later. And the other two things on the Navball are over here. These are the radials. Now if we point away from the planet, it's going to be in that blue realm on the Navball. That's literally just taking a ship and pointing it right away from the planet. And the other radial is over here, right towards the planet. So, and we'll talk about, you know, when and where to use those ones. But for now, let's just focus on getting out to our higher apoapsis, right? So we'll just put it in the direction it's traveling. It doesn't really matter. And let's continue to warp. As we pass the planet, you'll notice that we're actually starting to get higher. You can see it. Everything's kind of panning out for us. And we can truly see that the planet is indeed a ball, right? Okay, and we are getting towards our apoapsis. This is the highest point in the orbit, right? And tells you T-minus. We're about 9 seconds away. So this is the absolute highest point in our orbit. It's the highest. And if you notice, our orbital speed has slowed down dramatically. There was a law, I think, was it Kepler's laws? I can't remember, from astronomy class 4 years ago, but one of these laws, it was the laws of planetary motion. Basically, I think that's what it was. It stated that the closer an object is to its parent body in orbit, the faster it's going to revolve or orbit, right? But the farther away from the parent body, in this case Kerbal, the slower we're going to orbit. So right now our speed is only, you know, 1800 meters per second roughly. As we get closer to the periapsis, that speed is going to speed right up, and let's demonstrate that. So we're coming back around. Look down here at the bottom of the Navball, or top of the Navball rather. We're already at 2000, 2200, 2300, 24 roughly, right at the periapsis, right? Just about. So, and you'll probably remember, well, gee, that's faster than it was before. How is that possible? Well, because we've put more energy into the orbit, now we're going actually faster at the periapsis than we were before, because we've actually burned to pick up speed. The speed's not lost, it's in the orbit. It doesn't get lost. Alright, so let's say you're that perfectionist, right? What we have here is called an elliptical orbit. It's not perfectly circular, which means one side is farther out than the other. If you remember from math class, we probably talk about ellipses. Well, this is a perfect example. The center, there's not a direct center in an ellipse, right? There's two focus points in the center of the planet that are considered the center of the ellipse, right? You could also say that this orbit has an eccentricity. And no, I don't mean it's crazy, like a crazy aunt or uncle. It's just the orbit itself has a bit of an eccentricity to it. I wouldn't call it a high eccentricity because it's not that bad. If we maybe push the apoapsis out to about 500 or 600, then we could say it's about, high eccentricity. But we're going to correct this, right? I think it's always better to have circular orbits. So we're just going to zip around here. We're going to go back out to our apoapsis. Hello, KSC. There it is again, right? We're just going to zip on by. Jebediah Kerman enjoying his ride, right? He's happy. Okay, so like I said, remember I said before, we want to correct our orbit to raise and lower it. Anytime we do that, we have to make the corrections at either the apoapsis or the periapsis. So let's put our maneuver node down, right? And pull it out prograde, right? Until it flips. It was very quick. Yep, missed it again. It gets very finicky, but that's pretty close right there. So that'll make us a circle. So again, it's going to cost us around the same thing, about 130 meters per second. So we'll just find that maneuver node, a little blue marker, and we will warp to 6 seconds, which is right now. And there we go. See, our now change in velocity cost is going down, putting energy into the orbit. And you'll see over here, we've just about made it. So now we're roughly back to a circle again. It wasn't perfect. This is about 305, 299. So if this happens, if it's not perfect, wait till you get to the apoapsis again. Time to apoapsis is a minute and falling, right? So here we go. Alright, let's correct it a little more. Point it a little bit further to the prograde marker and thrust. Boom. That's a little closer, right? There we go. Now, of course, you could sit and muck around with it if you want to make it perfectly circular, but for all intents and purposes, I like this. This is fine. Okay, so there we are. We are now in a 300-kilometer circular orbit, and so the planet will basically stay around that far away from us. Also, notice our velocity on the Navball is staying roughly the same too, and that's because we're not closer or farther. Everything's about the same. It'll change a little bit, but for the most part, it's just going to stay like that. God, I love that crater. It's so nice. This game is so pretty. Okay, so let's say we want to come back down. Like, we've had enough. We're getting scared, right? Because, man, we're far away from home. So let's say we want to get a little closer. We're going to time warp to periapsis, right? And just about there. I'm going to do it manually this time. Alright, we're just about there. Now we're pointing prograde, so we're going to have to point the opposite direction. Retrograde. Going to wait another minute. Just using the square bracket, not square bracket, the period and comma keys to warp time, right? You get pretty good at that after a while of playing this game. It's like, can you catch it up? Yeah. Alright, actually that was kind of weird. It jumped away from us for a second. Hey, look at that, it keeps jumping away. Now, I remember this happening every once in a while, and I'm not really sure why, but so I'm just going to let it go naturally, right? Naturally to where it should be. I'm not sure, sometimes this game does that. Jeb's happy. But Jeb's always happy. Alright, that's about close enough. So here we go. We're pointing retrograde. We are going to thrust in this direction. And as you can see, it swept around. And now we're losing energy in the orbit, right? Bringing that right down. Say about... Let's go back to 100, right? That's where we were before. Boom, there we are. Okay, so we just went to one of the nodes before, we pointed retrograde, and we thrusted, and it has lowered our orbit, right? Now if we wanted to make the other side lower, we'd swivel around to periapsis, point retrograde again, and do another burn until it's circular again, right? But let's talk about some other orbital aberrations we can do here. Let's say you're bored of the equator, you want to see other things, you want to see a little higher, right? So what we're going to do is go roughly in between the apoapse and periapse, probably, let's say right about here. Add a maneuver and we'll point normal, actually, north, right? And you can see the projected orbit in orange now is rising up. It's no longer on the equator. You see on the opposite direction, it's pointing downwards, right? So this is going to be our new orbit. We're going to change the inclination. Okay, so we'll find our node right there, and it's going to take about 50 seconds of thrust. Now I might not let it go the whole 50 seconds, because if you look up here at our fuel, we've used about, you know, a quarter of the fuel, roughly. Maybe about a third, actually. So we're, yeah, probably a third. So we're not going to do, you know, crazy things. We have to make sure that we get back to the planet, right? But we'll just show you. Actually, I should burn right about now. It's about halfway, right? So as you can see, we're pointed north, literally just up. Pointed up. And you can see that the blue orbit now is starting to climb up to match the orange projected orbit, right? Just chewing through our fuel. That's okay. Don't worry, Jeb, I won't leave you up here. We'll stop it at about 60. That might even complete it for us. Okay, it was close. So this is our new orbit now, right? We've just changed the inclination, and all we did was point normal, or north. Now you might notice that my Navball looks a little different than yours, and don't worry, that's because I have installed the enhanced Navball mod, which I got on the Kerbal spaceport site. I believe you just type in enhanced Navball, and what it does is actually show you the markers on the Navball. Otherwise, you know, the way you could tell normally is just think about this. North is that orange line. North is normal. N and N, right? North, normal. Now, south isn't labeled on here, but we know south is directly, you know, 180 degrees away from north, right? So you find 180 degrees. This is south, anti-normal, right? So that's how you can tell if you don't have these pretty little pictures on the Navball like this. It'll show you prograde and retrograde, but the other ones I don't think are on the normal one. It's been so long since I actually used the normal Navball. But anyway, as you can see over here, we are now starting to ascend off the equator. If we warp a little bit, you can see it really, you're really rising there, right? Our highest point will actually be the periapsis. We're just getting away from that equator. Getting away from it. Okay, so this is now the most inclined part, is the highest part of the orbit. Highest point, but technically lowest point, right? Because of periapsis, but it's our highest off the equator. Alright, and if we keep warping, right, let's keep going. We'll actually start to now descend back down. There's our crater. You can see we're really crossing now. Just about crossing that equator now. Right there, now we're at the southernmost tip of that Africa-looking continent, right? That's our home continent, pretty much. And here we are, now way below. It's on the night side, I know, but you can probably still make it out a little bit. And there we are. Now, let's say you want to change this orbit back to normal again, right? You want the equator again. So what you do is you find the point on your orbit that crosses the equator, that crosses the ecliptic line, right? Which is roughly, you know, somewhere right around here. You could tell, because the line that the moon is on, that's pretty much the equator. So it's right about here. You can kind of eyeball this. It's okay. So we thrusted north before. We're going to thrust south until it's just about. You can kind of eyeball it. It's right about through the equator again, right? And if you look on our delta V requirements, it's going to cost about the same amount of fuel to get it back to normal, which I'm not going to do because I don't want to strand poor Jib. But if you wanted to do it, like let's say you built an orbiter, your next orbiter is a little bigger, right? Maybe you put a different engine on, more efficient. You could definitely do these maneuvers. In fact, I probably should have put the LV atomic nuclear engine on there. That would have been good, but I did not have the foresight, and that's okay, right? So we're gonna just get rid of that node. Now let's talk about one of the radial, right, the one away from the planet. Let's say you don't want to wait, or let's say you passed apoapsis. Oops, right? You want to balloon out that periapsis, but you know you've gone too far, and you don't feel like waiting all the way another orbit, right? So you position yourself about halfway in between the two again, right? And you point directly away from the planet, right away from it. And you start thrusting. What's going to happen? It's going to start pushing out that periapsis, right? But look at the apoapsis. It's going down a little bit. Periapsis is going up a little bit. What that's going to do is it's going to help make it more circular without actually being at one of the two nodes. And I'll stop it right there, just for for the sake of argument, right? But you could see that it started to push out the periapsis and reduce the apoapsis, so it was making it a little more circular. Alright, so we've talked about raising and lowering the orbit. We've talked about changing your inclination. So I think the only thing left to do is, you know, get home, right? So here's what we can do to get home. Let's first pick where do we want to land. Tell you what, let's try to land. Let's aim for this crater, right? Hopefully I have enough fuel to get there. So we're going to put a maneuver node roughly around, you know, a quarter away from it. Like if you think of it like a clock. Here's 3 o'clock over here. We're right down here at about 6. And we're going to pull the retrograde toggle, right? Because we want to slow the ship down. And now we're a little higher over here. So by the time the atmosphere hits us, it's going to be right around here. That's why I'm going past it a little bit, for 2 reasons really. One, because the Kerbal is going to pull us with its atmosphere once we get low enough, and it's just going to stop us pretty much. Also, another reason is because the planet rotates under us, right? So this is going to be a little further off once we get around to it, which isn't that far away. Let's just see. We're going to warp till we get to this particular node. Okay, so as you can see, look at that, it's now gone a little further inside. So what we're going to do, also I'm going to point it north a little bit, just so we get more of the inside of that, right? Pointing it north, and it's kind of, this is very intuitive. Like, you want to go up, you pull up. You want to go down, you pull down. You want to go forward, you pull forward, right? You want to pull side to side. I feel like Independence Day, if you guys ever saw that movie. We can go up, we can go down, we can go side to side. Alright, so, and because we're coming in, we want to just go a little past it. Oop, not that far. Maybe right about there. I think that should get us somewhere in between this circle. Now, that's what we're going to aim for. If I hit it, that'd be awesome. If I miss it, I'm a total noob. So let's point at the node. And in fact, here's our burn time, right? About 30 seconds of thrust. We're burning it about 15 seconds away. You can see our orbit's swiveling around. The periapsis is coming right in. Hopefully we have enough fuel. I think we'll be fine with the fuel. We'll have just enough. And bingo, right there. Now if we ran out of fuel, luckily we packed RCS fuel, right? We have a whole tank of monopropellant. We could just hit the R key, and to thrust forward, just like doing a burn, you would press the H key, and if you notice, there we are, we're thrusting forward, right? But since we're in the retrograde direction roughly, it's actually canceling the speed, right? Ever so slightly. And if you press on the opposite side, the N key, we're thrusting backwards now. And again, since we're pointing towards retrograde, it's actually making us go forward. That's kind of counterintuitive. We're thrusting backwards, but we're pointing backwards, so it means we're going forwards. Alright, so we're just going to push the R key, turn the RCS off, and we are just going to wait until this just gets in there, right? But luckily we can warp time. Let's position the ship in the direction that we're traveling. Which, again, it doesn't really matter, because we can spin this thing all kinds of crazy, and it's not changing anything, right? There's no air in space, so there's no resistance, you know. I mean, the way airplanes work is, you know, the wings bite into the air, and you could shift the wings and the ailerons, and that's how you turn, right? Well, in space, that doesn't work that way. You just keep on spinning like this forever and ever. But since we're gonna get dizzy, maybe, let's see what Jeb looks like in here. Whoa. Alright, so, you know, we don't want that to happen. I mean, Jeb loves it. Of course, we already knew that. So let's just push the T key. Look at that. That's why we have the advanced SAS. It just stopped us dead in our tracks. Okay, and since we... Actually, I might just push that out a little bit more. Just just a touch, because we're still rotating. It's rotating away from us. Just want to make sure I don't land over here or something. I'll land right in the middle there somewhere. Now, since we know we're going to land for sure, and since this is just about out of fuel, what we're going to do is we are just going to jettison this stuff, right? We don't need it anymore. So hit the space key, and it should pop that right off. There she goes. So all we are now is just a little capsule, just a little lonely capsule in space. And in this case, we're going to point at retrograde, because even though the reentry doesn't damage the ship at all, it might in the future, and it's a good idea to position your ship when you're in the capsule towards retrograde, because the heat shield would go right on this back, this kind of round, flat portion here. And that's how they really re-enter, or how they used to re-enter, right? Back when they made rockets with capsules. This little capsule is probably based off like the Mercury 7 capsules, like the little tiny single-manned capsules with a little window. If you guys are interested in like the early NASA program and how they did all that stuff, I highly recommend you watch When We Left Earth. It's a Discovery Channel show. I just recently discovered it a couple of weeks ago, and I loved it. I watched all 6 or 7 episodes just back to back. I ate it all up. It was so informative. It was awesome. I think it's on Netflix right now. At least it was when I watched it. Anyways, let's warp a little bit, right? Enough chit-chat here. Let's get over here. Now it's going to be a little bit, kind of nighttime, actually. Just about on the Terminator right there. And we'll continue to point retro, right? And we are coming in. And we're wobbling. I have no idea why we're wobbling. This game is so strange sometimes. I'll just turn the SAS off. I didn't like it. Look, it does not want us to have SAS. I have no idea why it's doing that. I'll press... No, that's... Oh, that fixed it. Okay. I'm not sure what that was. It was having a little mini seizure. The capsule was having a seizure. Alright. Probably not funny to joke about that, but here we come in, and we're still pretty high, so it's possible that now, we're going to make it. We're not going to overshoot it. We're going to be well within the little ring of islands here. And we're not going to deploy the parachute yet. I mean, it technically doesn't matter, but it kind of looks stupid if your parachute's out and you're burning through the atmosphere. It just doesn't look good, so we're just going to leave it in. Here we come. Here's the re-entry effects. This is probably my favorite part. Which is killing off all that velocity that we've gained. We have about 2 kilometers per second to kill off. And we're really heating up. Thank God we have that heat shield, right? And if you see on the right side of the Navball, the G-force is now risen to about 5 Gs. So Jeb is really feeling it right now. I think astronauts can tolerate, upwards of 9, maybe not much higher than 9. Once it gets to like the red, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, anywhere between 10 and 15 Gs will practically start killing them, right? They can't really tolerate that much, so that's why re-entry profiles. Oh, look at that. That is beautiful. We have a shot of the moon and Minmus a little bit to the left of it, and further back. That is beautiful. This game is just wonderful. I'm going to screenshot that. I'm sorry, I'm just going to cap that. Alright, I pressed the F2 key. That gets rid of the background, right? And the F1 key is our screen capture. So here we are. We made our target, right? Just about, we're almost at bullseye. We weren't really going for bullseye, but... Alright, now at this point is where we're going to hit the space key. There goes our parachute, right? So it's just kind of going to act like a drogue, right? It's going to just hang out there until our altitude gets to about 500 meters, and then that's when the parachute's going to open and we will be saved. We'll splash down in the water here in this crater. Gosh, that is so pretty. Look at the like setting sun over there. Or actually over there's the setting sun, right? That's the darkness. I'm just going to physical time warp a little bit, pressing the period key. Cut it back for opening. I don't know if it used, it used to do this where if you like time warped as you were coming in, sometimes the parachute wouldn't open, and Sometimes it hit the ground too hard, so I always get paranoid. I always click it back to time when it's opening, and then we can go back again, because this is going to take a while. There's our moon. Oh, look at the night sky right there. Just clicked in with our Milky Way. I guess it's the Milky Way. Could be the Kirby way, right? Who knows? The Kerbal way. Here we are, coming down and splash down, right? Luckily this thing floats. So there we have it. We've just come back from an orbital flight. We've talked about how to raise and lower the orbit, change the inclination, talked about the different symbols, normal, anti-normal, radial, prograde, retrograde, and we kind of talked about what an orbit is, basically orbiting 101, right? Now, I've just about run out of time, so in the next episode, we can talk about some other things, like how would you get to the moon, right? How would you possibly do that? Well, all it is raising the orbit to match where the moon's orbit is, but you can't just do it anywhere. You have to kind of put it in front of the moon, because the moon is revolving also, right? The moon is a moving target, so you have to like anticipate it. But we'll talk about that next episode. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you then.